Do you regret making the diorama so big?
Yeah, kinda. Subscribe for big diorama. Welcome back to Lizard of Doom. I am Max. Continuing on the Chaos Knight diorama, it's time to make the actual frame that all of this is going to sit in. Most people would come up with a plan. I, however, don't have a brain that does plans. Most people's first step would be this plan. However, my first step was to go shopping. I had my measurements and I looked for materials that I thought would do the job. I didn't have anything in mind particularly, I was just out to see what I could find. I found some acrylic for the front, some nice wood to build the frame from, and I had a plan for this cladding for the back and sides, along with some screws and some wood glue. This is where I normally sit, where you've seen me sitting in the intro of this, and this is where the diorama is going to go. I have this odd shape in my loft conversion, and it's a bit of a weird wall to put stuff on, so I thought that I would build the diorama up here, and future dioramas could go along the top with it. As you can see, I have a lovely blank space here. Please ignore the bad wiring, blame that on the previous owner. But this is the target zone. Ta-da! I got my materials up to the attic and started to work. The frame was relatively easy, just measuring out different bits of wood that I need to build a square and build it out. I was quite limited for space because obviously you can see there's a window on the left, so I had to bear that in mind. I drilled some guide holes for the screws and put it all together. I also used wood glue to help strengthen the bond between each piece of this frame. I wonder how many expert carpenters I'm going to get in the comments section telling me how wrong I've done all this. But hey ho, this is the first time I've ever built anything like this. I was very excited to try this, and I'm always pushing myself slightly out of my comfort zone for the channel. I didn't really take into account this light fitting, but I had perfectly made this frame within a millimetre of the light fitting. I did have to take it off and then refit it afterwards, but I couldn't have been more accurate if I tried. I also had to shorten my curtain pole on this window to make sure it fitted, but this was necessary. The diorama comes overall. This has been the first massive project on this channel and it's ongoing. Link up in the top corner right now if you haven't been keeping up with it. Check it out. Loads of different conversions and painting tutorials and bits and bobs. Every step is documented. Now I was rather smug because I thought I had a brilliant idea to get the right angles on this angular bit of the diorama. You can see this smug little bastard coming in here deciding he's going to make this frame really easily because he hasn't put the bottom angle on yet and he thinks he's got a trick up his sleeve. Ah, you can see him now lining up, and now he would just simply put a mark there and then it'll be done. Perfect angle. And then somehow he cut it 2 centimeters too short, so I had to make this little wood block on the end here. What a knob. But I used some wood glue to attach it and then a big old screw to power through all of it and connect it to the main part of the frame. A little bit of extra wood glue at the end to secure it in place properly, and this is actually probably one of the most sturdiest parts of the frame now. After that little balls up, the frame is complete and I am ready to move on to the next section. This took most of a day, to be honest. But yeah, I'm happy with my work so far. I think I've got an alright plan in my head. I've got an ADHD brain with kinesthetic learning mixed in, so I've got no real plan. No plan, just do. The back and sides of the diorama were going to be made of this cladding. Now this is because all of the MDF sheets were not the right size, but this is the right length if I cut it in half to make more than one side. Also, when you put them all together 5 wide, as there is 5 in a pack, that is the exact width of my diorama, the distance from the front of the diorama to the wall. So it was perfect just to slide into this frame here. I couldn't have asked for a better sized material. As I said, the MDF sheets and the plywood sheets in B&Q where I went to get my resources were all slightly too short in one direction or another, or ridiculously massive and expensive. So this was a good middle ground of affordable and the right size, so I used this. There were going to be slight issues with it, which I'll show you later, but this was a good cheap alternative, as I've spent way more money on this whole project than I've actually ever earned off YouTube in total. So if you feel like supporting me, Patreon up in the top corner now. After a little convincing, it all fitted just fine. Apart from the very top panel, which is the only one that I'd cut to slightly the wrong size. But this wasn't too much of an issue, just needed to be trimmed down a little bit. Once I'd done that, perfect. Like a glove. The actual cutting of the boards was all done now. I was left with these grooves though where the boards fitted together and some like impurities and little notches in the wood. So I needed to make these boards as smooth as ass cheeks. To fill the gaps where the board joined, I used this plaster compound meant for filling holes in drywall plasterboard. It worked quite well, and I left it overnight in the attic where it gets quite warm and was going to sand it down in the morning. In the morning I took it outside, which I was glad I did as the dust created was immense, and the garden is still a little bit white from this now, a couple of days later. This was a bit of hard work. A bit of elbow grease needed for this, but it's quite therapeutic in the end, getting it all nice and smooth. After a morning of hard work on my knees, I was starting to feel like your mum. The next stage was paint. I planned to use all of these spray paints to make the nice art I'm going to do on the back of the diorama as a backdrop to the models and the actual scene that are going in front of it. After wasting £12 worth of matte black spray trying to get this to look uniform and getting so angry I hulked up. I decided that this wasn't good enough. Look, you can see all the wood texture through it. The shine from the light outdoors doesn't help, but this acrylic, this cheap acrylic, was going to be my way forward. Where the wood and the plaster had met, they were different kind of textures, and with the spray paint you could see this through. Like I said, the shine from the natural light outside does not help any of this on film, and it does look better in real life, but I still wasn't happy with it. The shine from filming is also an issue with this acrylic paint, as you can see all the brush strokes. I promise you, in real life it does look a lot better, and you cannot see this when you're indoors and it's lit properly. Next up is a step I've never done before on anything. We're quite used to using rattle cans in this hobby, but I have never done spray paint art before, so I've watched a few videos and kinda hope this stuck in my head. I was going to do some spray paint art. The first stage to get texture on the spray paint art I'd seen from my research was to crumple up some old magazines. I didn't have an old magazine because I live in the 21st century, so I used my instruction booklet from my Leviathan box set. I kept them safe in an old plant pot and put them to one side for now. The plan is to lay down colour and then texture it and then put something round over the top and paint around the round thing, leaving just a circle so it would look like a planet. This wasn't really going to plan. When I was trying to texture it, it wasn't looking like how I'd seen it in the other videos I'd looked at for research, and it would even take paint off of the board entirely, leaving bare wood. I was really unhappy with this. This was a low point for me in this project, and I had to think on my feet and just go again. There's no point wasting time when you know something's wrong and you won't be able to fix it. Don't fall into the sunk cost fallacy that you've put so much time into it. If you need to start again, you need to recognise that and go again. To make myself a bit happier, I decided to paint the stars on this night sky scene. This is done by spray painting white spray paint on your fingertips and flicking it to make these nice spatter patterns. I decided to work smarter this time and make the round shape to start with, cutting the bottom off of my plant pot and using it as a stencil. Spray painting red and then light brown in the top corner and dark brown in the bottom corner, with a touch of white to give it a highlight. Then how you texture it properly is wipe your fingers across, leaving these stripes, and then the texture of the crumpled paper gives it texture in between those stripes. This was much better. I was very happy with this compared to my first attempt and decided to do a little moon as well, using metallic spray paint as the base, dark grey in the bottom corner, and white in the top corner. After the first round of texturing, I thought I'd taken too much paint off, so I decided to put more light in the top corner and more dark in the bottom corner again. Once I was happy with these, it was time to work on the background. I started laying down some darker grey underneath, and then some rusty orangey reddy colours for the kind of nebula in this galaxy. The whole diorama is based on Discar. If you've been keeping up with the lizard lore in this diorama project, you know it's a rust-ridden, degraded planet, and I wanted the galaxy it was in to feel orangey and browny as well. So these are the colour palette I went with for this background. After adding a bit more grey haze to this nebula, I then added some more stars on top to make them brighter, as well as the dulled ones behind the nebula. This gave it a bit more depth, I feel. I added quite a lot because I wanted this to be really kind of expansive to make it feel big. After this, I added a little white highlight to the top corners and took off my stencils. I like this effect. Where the stencils had come off leaves a ring around. I feel it looks like an atmosphere around the planet, and, you know, reasonably happy with that. This was going to be the night sky of the diorama. However, we are not floating around in space. These Chaos Knights are feet on the ground, so now we need to do that ground. Well, not the ground, the background ground. Background. So now I have to represent the planet of Discar through spray paint art. I did this by cutting a stencil for the mountains of Discar and spraying in a dirty brown colour. This gave me a nice horizon line and somewhere to aim for when I'm building the actual diorama in front of this. I decided to do essentially a mountain range. So many mountains that you would be boggled and lost in this jungle planet, in this horrendous, natural, unforgiving landscape. I also added a little bit of grey mist, the starts of grey mist in between the mountains, because I want the atmosphere on this planet to feel kind of choking and thick. It's really somewhere you don't want to find yourself, and the Deathcore of Krieg on this planet are probably cacking themselves. Even though they come from Krieg, this is not the place to be. Once I was relatively happy with that, I kind of added a light misting of grey all over the planet's surface and took it upstairs to complete. I was really happy with what I'd done. This is the first time I've ever tried anything like this. I'm doing it on camera for you and on a massive project. After that, I sponged on some undergrowth with different shades of green, building in lightness towards the kind of back edges and darkness towards the bottom. Then I sponged on some brown to kind of give an idea of the tree trunks and different things growing under the canopy in this jungle planet. And then dusted with a light white colour to add more mist to the top of the scene. I wanted this to look thick. Like if you were lost in this jungle, you would never be able to see your way out. After this, I thought it was necessary to bring out the mountains again with a nice dark brown colour, as they would be poking over the top of the mist, and this would add a bit of depth to the scene, making it feel like the misty valleys were really deep and these mountains crested above that. Also, I forgot to wear a glove, so I've got lovely chocolate fingers now. At least it looks a bit like chocolate. Maybe something else though. After this, I attached them with black carpentry screws so it blended in nicely with the dark background of all the sides of the diorama. I'm really happy with this project so far. There is about to be a bit of a calamity. Usually when I do hobby projects, I get a few actuallys in the comments telling me I've done stuff wrong, even though I'm happy with my results. And I've usually justified it why I'm doing it that way in the commentary over the top. I wonder how many carpentry experts we will get today on this hobby video telling me how wrong I have done everything in this video. Hey, we're like 15 minutes into the video now, maybe more, so I'm guessing some have already left a comment and buggered off. Anyone who keeps models on display in their room, or there's a moth in that light, can you just let the moth out of that light please, so it doesn't make too much noise? Like pull the filter up and it should fly out. Yeah! What was I saying? Oh yeah. Anyone who stores their models on a shelf in their rooms or in their gaming rooms or whatever, you will know they collect dust. I do not want this whole diorama collecting dust, so I need to protect that. Best way to do that is kind of like a trophy case, where you put a covering in front, whether it's glass or acrylic is more easy to work with, so I went with acrylic. But it was about to go a little bit wrong. Everything fitted, the background looking fresh. It was time for me to then think about covering it in acrylic. I added an extra layer of the wood that I'd made the frame from to the outside to give the acrylic a shelf to sit on and kind of something to hold it in place. I'd never cut acrylic like this before, so I slid it in and measured it out and marked where I thought I needed to cut. Confident in my saw's ability, as it did have a plastic cutting setting and a special blade for plastic cutting, so I started to cut, and disaster. it had shattered part of the acrylic. I was left with shards like this. I thought maybe I was doing something wrong, so I readjusted the acrylic so it had more support from the table, made sure I was holding up the other side exactly even, and went again. A couple of inches later, same problem. I had to think on my feet and think fast because I was running out of time for this project and I needed this to be cut. So I decided to do a little bit more research and come back at it with a fresh head. I'd found the scoring method for cutting acrylic sheets like this. I'd gone over it several times with a knife, leaving a nice groove along the flat edge of this piece of wood, and set it up on the edge of the table to just snap it. This was a bit daunting to do. You know, just snapping a piece of acrylic you paid like nearly 50 quid for. I went for it. I carefully manoeuvred the piece of wood out of the way to see what I had done. You can see it's nice, perfect, shattered, and no, didn't break in the right place. With a little bit of careful trimming, I made it roughly fit, and the only piece that would be visible at the end of this was a slight crack in the bottom edge. But I have a plan for that when it comes to making the actual diorama that is going to go in this frame. Finally, this thing was in place. I'd gone delirious over the several days of working on this, but I was just glad that I'd avoided complete catastrophe with this sheet of acrylic. To hold it in place, I was going to use this wooden beading. This was to sit on the outside edge of the frame, and then the acrylic would sit in this gap here and hopefully be pinched in place. I was going to glue this beading to the edge here with some wood glue and hope that's strong enough to hold it. The bottom edge of this frame does come off, so I can then remove the acrylic. The one edge where the acrylic had shattered really badly, I put a bit of beading on the inside as well to give it some support and hopefully hide it a little better as well. With the nice peely peels, the acrylic was finally in place and I was happy with my work. I used wood glue and a clamp to hold the beading in place while it dried, and it worked like a charm. Covered up any damage apart from one little crack in the bottom edge. It had been a tough couple of days of rather intensive labour working on this, but I loved this project and I'm incredibly happy with the outcome of this diorama case. Over the next 2 months, I'm hoping to finish this thing for good and have something amazing to show you all at the end of it. So if you haven't already, check out the playlist of everything we've been through so far, and now we're going to be getting towards the end of this project very, very soon. Thank you all for watching this necessary step in the diorama. I don't expect this video to do amazingly, but it is a very necessary one to get this project where I want it to go. And thank you to my lovely Patreons. This side, right here. If you would like to join, as mentioned earlier, I have a Patreon. Links down in the description below. If you're interested in where this project's going and the future of the channel and all my different projects, please subscribe. Do the like, the share, the comment, all the good YouTube stuff to help get this out there. Thank you, you really help me when you do that. And remember, it's not a pile of shame, it's a pile of future fun. See you next time.